Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a highly structured, honestly almost clinical framework for achieving absolute personal autonomy. The source text we're diving into is called The Sovereign Ascent, the Binary Architecture of Growth. If you're looking to just completely strip away the noise of modern self-help and examine human behavior through a radically objective lens, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to unpack a system that attempts to remove literally all the gray areas of life.
The text actually anchors its entire philosophy on this pretty famous quote from Abraham Maslow. In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety. Okay, let's dive into this because according to our source material, there is absolutely no neutral ground in the architecture of a human life. The whole idea of just maintaining or stagnating, it's presented as a complete illusion. You are always inevitably moving in one of two directions.
The source material formally defines this concept as the Sovereign Ascent Protocol. And what's really fascinating about how this is presented is just its sheer minimalism. It deliberately strips away all those complex nuances we usually hear about, deep human psychology, biohacking trends, complicated strategic positioning, and it reduces your entire existence down to a continuous, high-stakes binary decision tree. It's this incredibly cold, clinical distillation of your daily choices into a single, recurring yes or no question.
Section 1. The Ultimate Binary Choice.
And this brilliantly illustrates the text's core argument. Because according to the framework, every single micro moment of your day, from the exact second your alarm rings to the moment you face a heavy lift or a tough conversation, represents a divergent trajectory. The source basically lays out a mathematical formula for these moments. When you choose to step forward, you encounter acute friction, and that friction actively creates systemic growth. But when you step back, sure, you get instant comfort, but that inevitably leads to systemic decay. So friction creates adaptation, while comfort manufactures weakness.
Section 2. Neuroscience of the fork.
To actually execute this protocol, the text argues we have to understand our internal biochemical forces. Why? Because in the exact millisecond a decision presents itself, there is a literal clash happening inside your brain. It's an internal battlefield. On one side, you have the gravity of safety. That's driven by your Paleolithic amygdala, the ancient part of you that desperately seeks the herd and avoids danger. On the other side, you have the volatility of growth, which is commanded by your prefrontal cortex, the advanced hardware that drives sovereignty, logic, and true independence.
Let's break down the amygdala's default script. To your primitive survival hardware, safety basically means preserving metabolic energy and avoiding risk at all costs. The text uses some highly relatable examples here. It's that overwhelming temptation to hit snooze and stay under the warm sheets, right? Or reaching for those hyper-palatable processed snacks we all secretly love. Or maybe just remaining silent in a room full of volatile groupthink. And why do we do this? Simple. Because it triggers a cheap drop of dopamine that keeps your nervous system completely unbothered.
Now contrast that with the prefrontal command. Stepping forward into growth is described by the text as a deliberate, conscious act of internal warfare. You are manually overriding your deepest, oldest survival instincts. The text notes that this growth almost always masquerades as acute discomfort or cognitive redlining. We're talking about the willingness to lean into the heavy iron when your body is absolutely fatigued, or enforcing a brutal media fast on yourself, or having the guts to speak a hard truth during a tense negotiation.
Section 3. The Compounding Ledger. Let's slow down for a second here, because the text makes a really important distinction. A single step back won't instantly destroy you. The trap lives entirely in the compounding interest of your iterated loops. Just look at how this maps out. If your vector is constantly stepping back into safety, your risk tolerance completely atrophies. You slowly become what the text bluntly calls a compliant consumer node. But if you consistently step forward, you hardwire a grit blueprint. You expand your wisdom and become this unyielding anchor capable of absolute autonomy.
And the source issues a pretty stark warning right here. If you consistently choose that safety vector, you condition your nervous system to treat literally all friction as an absolute barrier. You run the very real risk of sliding passively into the fragile, hyper-reactive 90% mass average. The text describes this population as easily manipulated by corporate handouts, artificial scarcity panic, and the most basic psychological levers of influence.
So the crucial point is this: stepping forward introduces controlled, hormetic stress. It's essentially a biological upgrade. By continuously claiming the forward vector, the text asserts that you make yourself completely immune to external noise. You become highly capable of navigating any terrain entirely on your own terms, completely free from the manipulation that constantly affects the mass average.
Section 4. The Execution Checklist. So, how do we actually apply all this philosophy? Well,
The source material provides a highly structured, three-step daily discipline drill designed to ensure that comfort-seeking malware doesn't domesticate your potential. Step 1. Label the split. Step 2. Collapse the deliberation window. And Step 3. Train the binary lineage. Let's look at exactly how each of these steps functions in real time.
Step 1 happens the exact moment you feel that internal resistance bubble up. Maybe you're staring at a heavy barbell, or you're preparing to open up a highly complex data spreadsheet. The text says to immediately pause the system. Do not react emotionally. Instead, visually draw the fork in your mind with cold, clinical detachment. You literally tell your psyche, safety is to the left, growth is to the right. Choose the path.
Then comes Step 2, and the magic number here is 5 seconds. According to the framework, the absolute greatest ally of the safety script is time. The text warns that if you allow your brain to just sit at that fork for more than 5 seconds, your Paleolithic hardware will invariably generate a highly sophisticated, completely rationalized excuse to back down. You know exactly what this sounds like. I'll just do it tomorrow, or I really need more rest, or, it's just not worth the conflict right now.
Let's move to see how this builds. Step 2 demands that you ruthlessly kill the window. You adopt a machine-like execution cadence. The exact moment the forward growth vector is identified, you have to physically or cognitively move into the friction before your mind has the clearance to argue it out of it. And this ruthless necessity for action doesn't just stop with you.
Section 5. Training the next generation.
The text argues that this pristine, unambiguous framework isn't just a tool for your own personal optimization, it's actively meant to be passed down to anchor developing psychology. The source takes a very firm traditional stance on parenting here. When a child faces fear, frustration, or fatigue, whether they are intimidated by a tough curriculum at school or hesitant out on a sports field, the instruction is explicit. Do not coddle them with soft protective lies. You do not let them chase the easy baseline. Instead, you hand them the code.
Now, what's really interesting about this exact phrasing is how it frames struggle. The text literally scripts out the interaction, advising you to look them in the eyes and say, take a deep breath, lock your gaze on the peak, and step forward into the friction. That is where your hardware upgrades. Notice that? It doesn't frame the struggle as a punishment or some negative experience just to be survived. It frames it as a necessary, mechanical, biological upgrade.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway of the Sovereign Ascent Protocol. By utilizing this framework, you stop viewing life as just a chaotic sequence of random events that you simply have to react to. Instead, your existence becomes a self-directed masterpiece, built one deliberate forward step at a time. It's entirely about swallowing that temporary discomfort of the ascent to secure an unshakable, sovereign destiny, one that no external force can ever take away from you.
Which leaves us with the ultimate application of this entire explainer. We've mapped out the neuroscience, we've looked at the compounding ledger, and we have the execution checklist. The theory is laid out clearly in front of us. So the only thing left to ask is this: at your very next micro-moment fork, when that alarm goes off tomorrow morning, or when you face that next piece of friction, which vector will you choose?